Hi, this is Michelle from the Happy Mind, Happy Life podcast, and I am extremely grateful to have been working with Kim. When we started working together, I knew I wanted to grow my audience, but I wasn't sure how, and I didn't realize how much impact small strategic tweaks could really make. And Kim helped me refine my messaging just by adjusting like my titles and descriptions and make subtle shifts that literally improved my visibility to the point where I have tripled my listeners over the course of just a couple months. And nothing felt overwhelming. Nothing felt forced. It all just aligned with my brand and what it is that I wanted to put out there. And yeah, I'm so thankful for her guidance and the momentum that we've created together.
Numbers can feel intimidating. Ask me how I know. But your podcast stats are super important. They are actually telling you a story about your podcast and where you need to go with your podcast. It's going to tell you how well episodes are doing. It's going to tell you when people start to drop off. And it's even going to tell you what episodes you need to dive deeper into. My name is Kim Parkinson, a certified podcast growth strategist and podcast producer who has years of experience just talking about podcasts and different techniques to get your voice heard. So not only do I help people launch, but I also help them grow their podcasts. And one of the very first things that we do is we look at your stats. You're listening to Podcasting for Your Spiritual Business. And today, in this Podcast Basics series episode, we're talking about stats and the different pieces of it, because I think it's super confusing for most of you, as there are a lot of different nuances just within the realm of different podcast hosting on what that is. So I'm going to try to go over some of the basics, and then just know that your host could dive deeper into one or a little shallower in other areas. So just be aware of that as we are continuing on today. So within your podcast host, you should be able to see what your podcast download numbers are for each individual episode. Then hopefully will also give you a number based on how many downloads you got per the month. And if some of them do how many you get per 30 days, 60 days, 90 days onward for each episode, and some of them just don't. So again, depending on what you're looking at, what I'm going to advise you to do is keep an eye on all of that if you can. So I also have a little spreadsheet that I'm very willing to send you over to. That's going to be in the show notes there. And what we're going to do is that is just a very simple spreadsheet where we keep track of the number of the episode, what kind of episode it is, whether that's an interview or a solo, and then what is the topic, maybe what is the title of the episode, what maybe is your CTA, that's also important in there too, and then just what your stats are, right? Whatever the data is after 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and then beyond. Now, here's a couple of places that you can look. If your hosting platform does not give you the numbers that you want, you can individually go into Apple Podcast Connect or Spotify and look at those numbers there. But hopefully you have a hosting platform that gives you all that data. One section to note is that there is another platform out there that does not give you that data inside of your hosting platform. And that is if you have connected your RSS feed to YouTube. YouTube does not aggregate back to your hosting platform. So you need to go to YouTube and you need to see what the numbers are there. And then if you've uploaded a video file, that's actually two videos or two things that you have to look inside of YouTube. Just know that. Okay. So you might need to add extra columns onto that spreadsheet if you want to. Now, what are these? Let me kind of break this down. There's a couple of numbers that actually matter. And what are they? The first one that I talk about a lot is downloads and what counts as a download. This is when someone, they haven't hit play yet, but their device has downloaded your audio. So whether or not that is automatic, if you're using, say, Apple Podcast Connect, that actually will download the audio for you automatically every time a new episode goes out if you've hit the subscribe button and the little circle button at the top that says download. Now, if you don't listen to an episode after a certain amount of time, it will stop that. It will stop downloading. So just know people will lose it. So if you don't put out an episode regularly, Apple will say, I think it's after 14 or 15 days, Apple will say, hey, there's no more episodes. We won't download any more of those. So that person would have to manually go in and hit that download button again. But that is neither here nor there for this, but that it would count as a download. Now I can go and I can download a episode from my device, my Apple phone. I can then download an episode to my computer because it's not an Apple, it's just a regular PC. I could download it to another device if I owned a different device. And all of those, that would be 3 downloads for that one episode for one person. It's not done by IP, it's done by device. Okay, so that's a download. Does not ever mean that they listen, by the way. Now, there are ways to find that out. That's a consumption rate. Inside of your hosting platform, there could be a section where you can find consumption rate. And that will tell you approximately how long people have been listening to your episode. Now, Spotify and Apple are really good at drilling this down. So if you really wanted to get into that, you could go into those and look at those consumption rates. They do aggregate back to your hosting platform, just so you know, if that hosting platform actually does allow that. But what happens is you may get tiered or averaged out consumptions based on what's coming in from Spotify, what's coming in from Apple, what's coming in from somebody else. So your hosting platform might just give you like an average or a tiered rate there. But consumption rate actually lets you know whether or not people are dropping off at the beginning, whether they're listening to the whole thing, or whether or not they, maybe you had an ad in the middle and they dropped off after the ad. And then you're like, ooh, no more ads or no more of that ad. Maybe it was the ad specifically. And you would know that if you looked at the consumption rate. Now, YouTube does an excellent job of having consumption rates. So you can always look at those as well. Okay, well, now I'm thinking, okay, you've told me about downloads. You told me about consumption rates. Where am I going to be? Like, this is a lot. You don't have to do this for every episode, right? You don't have to do this every day. As a matter of fact, I suggest you don't. It's kind of like weight loss. Don't look at your downloads on a daily basis if you can. You can if you want to, but I feel like you would feel better if you waited at least a week between weigh-ins. So I like to look at my downloads and my numbers monthly. When I look at my downloads, what I like to look at is the last episode that is now 30 days old. I'm not looking at the episodes that I released this month. I'm looking at the episodes that I released 30 days ago. Those episodes are going to be the ones, what is the download number? Again, I have no way of knowing whether or not somebody actually listened to the full thing. Maybe I can look at the consumption rate for that. But here's the thing. If I went ahead and I downloaded a whole bunch of your episodes today, I put my phone on airplane mode and went to England and I listened to them all on the plane, your hosting platform would have no way of knowing that I've listened to every single one of those episodes. And so the consumption rate could be off based on that. So, and consumption rate actually is, it's different. YouTube right now says that consumption, like they will give you a hit just based on one person clicking on the link of your actual episode. Whereas Apple says you need to listen to 30 seconds in order to be counted as an episode number. So again, there's a lot of dispute, a lot of different views here on what is considered maybe consumption, download, and all of that. So this is why I like to just look at the download rate and then the consumption rate to see whether or not people are, one, downloading, because if they're coming back week after week, they're downloading that and they are interested in hearing more. Because again, if you are on some of those platforms and they've hit the subscribe button and they're downloading, even if that is downloading every week, if it's on Apple or several others, they will stop if you have not listened or downloaded or done something with that episode within 15 days. So that is something to note right there. Now, as far as the other pieces, sometimes people might say, well, how many subscribers do I have? This is really hard. Now, I will say that you could go into Spotify and it will say maybe how many followers you have or how many subscribers you have. I think Apple does as well, but that's not giving you a big picture. That's just giving you that for that one platform. And that's not a really good, clear depiction of how many people are there. So, what I like to tell people is I base it 24 hours after an episode has released because I'm going to assume that after 24 hours that's released, that every device that has been subscribed has downloaded that episode, which means if you look at your episode 24 hours after it's released, if you have 72 downloads in that first 24-hour period, you have 72 subscribers. It isn't an exact science. It is just a estimation, unfortunately. And that's actually a couple of reasons. Privacy concerns, realistically, is the number one. They used to be a lot easier to drill down, and then Apple kind of backed off, Spotify kind of backed off, all because of privacy concerns. There's a lot of concerns about privacy in Europe as well. And so realistically, all we can see is just some averages, some basics, some kind of knowledge like that. So now you're thinking, okay, well, how do I know if this is working? There are a couple of things, and I like to look at episode performance, right? How many downloads did one particular episode get? If there's one episode that's like rising to the top, always getting downloads every month, every couple of days or whatever, that episode was really popular. Maybe you had really amazing SEO, maybe you had amazing keywords in that, but also could be something that your listeners really want to listen to. And then let me tell you, if that's the case, we want to send them more of that information. And so that's why it's so important to not just look at the 30 days old episodes, but also all the episodes. What episode was super popular? What episode's getting more traction on a consistent basis? And so those ones, those are the ones that you want to put out more episodes on. Okay. So what else can you see inside of your stats? You can, inside of that consumption rate, you can find out whether or not people are dropping off early. You can find out if they're dropping off mid-episode again with the ads or whatnot. See if they're doing completion rates. And you can also see geographic data. That is actually super important if you are international, right? So who are you speaking to? Are you getting a lot of hits in Canada? Well, maybe you need to think about that if you are really directing your information specifically around, European pounds or American dollars, or I don't know, whatever it might be, that if you're specifically talking about one thing, maybe you are talking about your local pubs and breweries or something. You can actually kind of see in some hosting platforms what city they're listening from. It is a general city, by the way. It's not going to give you an IP address of exactly where that person is. It's going to say it's going to say Naples, Florida, or something like that. It's not going to say, the address. So you can also get within these a device breakdown. Where are they listening from? Are they listening on their mobile devices? Are they listening on a computer? Are they listening on some other type of a device? So that's really cool. That will give you that. And it will even give you the distribution platform that they're using. So it will say this many people are listening on Apple Podcasts, this many people on Spotify, this many people on, and then all the way down. Now, I don't know that it gets to every single one, but it does. It will give you maybe a unknown, 40 or something like that after that. So just so you know, that will also give you some data too. Where are people listening? Because those are then the links that you want to share. If you've got 90% of your people listening on Apple, please ask them for a review. Please tell them to go hit that subscribe button. Please then send out the Apple link. If you're getting a lot of people on Spotify, same thing. Go make sure you give me 5 stars. Make sure that you are, sending me a message, because in Spotify, you can actually send a message, and then you have to log into Spotify, by the way, and then you have to reply if you wanted to. All right. Don't ignore your numbers. Really, this is super important, but don't obsess over them because, again, they tell you a lot of information. The day one numbers, they're going to tell you your subscribers. The day 30 is going to tell you how many downloads you're getting for that episode. Like how many are you really getting? And then, if that number grows on day 60, day 90 and beyond, that episode is a great episode. Let's talk about that episode again. You can bring them back to that episode, or you can talk about the topic within that episode again too. So there's a couple of things here that are really important to look at, because then you can really base your content around what your listeners are looking for and listening to. So again, this is just a weekly glance. Monthly glance is fine. Don't do the dailies. You can, but it just sometimes could get you, upset. Although I'm going to give a caveat here that I had a client earlier this week in my office hours coming in, and she said, I haven't gotten any downloads today. And I said, really? I said, I noticed that you just changed your cover art. And she said, yeah. And I haven't gotten a single download. And I said, let's change your cover art back to the old cover art. People aren't loving that cover art, maybe. And she did, and her downloads resumed. So sometimes being and looking at those right away, especially if you've made any changes like cover art or maybe description or name or anything like that, could be a good benchmark as to maybe those weren't a good number. Maybe that wasn't a good choice to move that. So that is a time when maybe looking at your stats on a daily basis would actually benefit you to make sure that you don't lose regular listeners or people finding you. So now, what is a good number? What is a good download number? You're telling me I should be watching for a download number, but what is it? And let me just tell you, if you are just starting off, celebrate every download you have. Even if in your heart of hearts that it is you, your best friend, your mother, your sister, and your neighbor next door. It doesn't matter. They hopefully now will start to share it out to the world. And the next one will maybe have one more, and the next one more, and the next one more. So when you're starting out, your numbers may be low. This really depends on your niche, depends on your social media presence, depends on if you send out newsletters, depends on whether or not you did a launch party, depends on a lot of different things. But celebrate every single download that you get when you first start, because otherwise you may just pod fade, and we don't want that. So once you have an established podcast, and I mean after you've been podcasting for a year, and I mean after you've had a number of episodes under your belt, you should then be able to see about 100 downloads after 30 days. That's the first benchmark that I look at. Now, if you've been podcasting for a while and you're not seeing that, then maybe it's time to change your podcast cover art, change your podcast name, add some keywords to that description. There's lots of other things that we could talk about. And if you need help with that, please reach out, kim@kpcreativemedia.com, and I'll be happy to go ahead and help you with that. I have a couple of different programs that can help you make sure that you are now being seen and heard by the right people that you want to be heard and seen from. So those are just some basic numbers that you're going to be looking for. Once you have been established, then the next part is like 250 an episode, and then 500 an episode, and then 1,000 an episode. Here's the thing. Unless your name is Mel Robbins or Joe Rogan or, any one of those big names, do not set yourself up for failure thinking that you're going to have 10,000 downloads an episode. That just isn't how it works for the average person. You are ultimately currently looking at talking to anywhere between, I'll say, 10 to 150 people. But think of it this way. If you had 10 people in your room with you right now and you were talking to them, would you be happy? If you had 150 people in your room right now and you were talking to them, would you be nervous? So there's lots to consider here. Okay. And here's the thing. The more content, the more consistency, the more it's going to get pushed out. The more that you talk about it, the more you put out a newsletter about it, the more social media about it, the more you talk about it in your Facebook groups, your Threads groups, your whatever groups that you belong to, the more people that are going to listen. And as long as you're using SEO keywords or you're using some type of keywords, putting it up on your website, any of those pieces, don't have to do them all, but any of those pieces are going to just help you be searchable and findable on not only Google and the podcast distribution platforms, but also nowadays in AI. So you want to make sure that you are podcasting for consistency, making sure you're bringing value, and making sure that you're paying attention. Which episodes are doing really well? And I need to talk about those some more because that is number one, the first thing that I tell clients. They will look at an episode and one episode has done leaps and bounds above others. And I say, have we talked about that again? Oh, no, I did it once. Let's do it again because people loved it the first time. They're going to love it again the second time. And you can always refer back to the first episode, which is going to bring more downloads to that one, which is just going to be a really great cyclical little thing that we're going to do. So stats are a compass, but they're not a report card. It is definitely not how well you're doing. If you've got 150 downloads for this one episode after 5 hours, yes, maybe you're doing amazing, but are you converting those people over to being clients? There's a lot of different pieces here, right? There's a lot of different things that could be, you could have amazing downloads, but sending them to nowhere. And so you are just talking, giving your authority out there, but not inviting them to the next step. So there's, again, lots of different pieces here to think about, but the podcast stats is where we're going to start because I want to know what your episodes are doing and how well they're doing. And then again, if you have that ability to look at the consumption rate, not all hosting platforms do, you can see where people might be dropping off, where people might be listening to the full thing, and whether or not people are at all interested in certain episodes, right? Again, I go by downloads because I feel like it is a better benchmark because if you turn that Wi-Fi off or you're going for a walk in the woods, doesn't matter. The consumption rate doesn't matter anymore. So pay attention to your downloads. See which episodes are the most important and make more of those episodes if it aligns with your podcast. That's what's also important. And then always invite them to something, right? Invite them to a call with you or invite them to join your newsletter or invite them to your offer because that is really where you're going to start to see some of the magic shine and or invite them to give you a review on Apple or Spotify. That's really where you're going to see, people do love it. People do see that. So, hey, you know what? Even though I already told you if you needed help, you could reach out to me. Why not? If you're interested, leave a message down below on Spotify or YouTube for this particular video and tell me where you are listening in from. I'd love to know. And then if you're not on that, go ahead and leave a review on Apple and let me know what your favorite episode has been so far in this Podcast Basics series. Until next time, hopefully you have a little bit more data about podcast stats and you're ready to go grab those. I do have that Google spreadsheet down below for you to get your stats ready for yourself. So until next time, where your voice flows, your business grows. I'm Kim Parkinson, and you've been listening to Podcasting for Your Spiritual Business. See you next week. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me today. If you're ready to deepen your visibility and grow your podcast in a way that feels aligned, come join my email list at kpcreativemedia.com/newsletter, where I share exclusive guidance, support, and next steps. And if this episode resonated, I'd be so honored if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the most powerful ways to support the show and help other spiritual women discover it. Until next time, keep showing up and sharing your voice.